In The Colour Out of Space by H.P. Lovecraft, we hear the story of a meteorite that falls near Arkham and the devastation it causes over the following years. In part 4, Ammi has dealt with the thing in the attic and has to head back down. Terrified by the noises, he fortifies himself and walks back to Nahum. What is left of Nahum is in a terrible state, but still tries to give an explanation. With all the gardeners gone, Ammi calls in investigators from Arkham, but the horrors have not finished with them yet. If you want to hear more, please click like, subscribing and clicking the bell, then all will let you know when a new episode releases. Let us know what you liked and what you want to see more of in the comments. You can even join us on Patreon. For now though, it's time to enter the Cave of Chronicles. A feeble scratching on the floor downstairs now sounded distinctly, and Ammi's grip tightened on the heavy stick he had picked up in the attic for some purpose. Slowly nerving himself, he finished his descent and walked boldly into the kitchen. But he did not complete the walk, because what he sought was no longer there. It had come to meet him, and it was still alive after a fashion. Whether it had crawled or whether it had been dragged by any external force, Ammi could not say. But the death had been at it. Everything had happened in the last half hour, but collapse, greying and disintegration were already far advanced. There was a horrible brittleness and dry fragments were scaling off. Ammi could not touch it, but looked horrified into the distorted parody of what had been a face. "What was it, Nahum? What was it?" he whispered, and the cleft, bulging lips just able to crackle out a final answer. "Nothing, nothing. The colour, it burns, cold and wet, but it burns. It lived in the well. I seen it, a kind of smoke, just like the flowers last spring. The well shone at night. There and Marnie and Zenas, everything alive, sucking the life out of everything. In that stone, it must have come in that stone, poisoned the whole place. Don't know what it wants. That round thing them men from the college dug out in the stone. They smashed it. It was same colour, just same like the flowers and plants. Must have been more of them. Seeds, they growed. I seen it the first time this week. Must have got strong on Zenas. He was a big boy, full of life. It beats down your mind and then gets ye. Burns ye up in the well water. You was right about that. Evil water. Zenas never came back from the well. Can't get away. Draws ye. You know someone's coming, but 'tain't no use. I seen it again since Zenas was took. Where's Nabby, Amy? My head's no good. Don't know how long since I fed her. It'll get her if we ain't careful. Just a colour. Her face was getting to have that colour sometimes. towards night. And it burns and sucks. It come from someplace where things ain't as they is here. Some of them professors said so. He was right. Look out, Ammi. It'll do something more. Sucks the life out. But that was all. That which spoke could speak no more, because it had completely caved in. Ammi laid a red checked tablecloth over what was left and reeled out the back door into the fields. He climbed the slope to the 10-acre pasture and stumbled home by the north road and the woods. He could not pass the well from which his horse had run away. He had looked at it through the window and had seen that no stone was missing from the rim. Then the lurching buggy had not dislodged anything after all. The splash had been something else. Something which went into the well after it had done with poor Nahum. When Ammi reached his house, the horse and buggy had arrived before him and had thrown his wife into fits of anxiety. Reassuring her without explanations, he set out at once for Arkham and notified the authorities that the Gardner family was no more. He indulged in no details, but merely told of the deaths of Nahum and Nabby, that of Thaddeus being already known, and mentioned that the cause seemed to be the same strange ailment which had killed the livestock. He also stated that Merwin and Zenas had disappeared. There was considerable questioning at the police station, and in the end, Ammi was compelled to take 3 officers to the Gardner farm, together with the coroner, the medical examiner, and the veterinary who had treated the diseased animals. He went much against his will, for the afternoon was advancing and he feared the fall of night over that accursed place. But it was some comfort to have so many people with him. 6 men drove out in a Democrat wagon, following Ammi's buggy, and arrived at the pest-ridden farmhouse about 4 o'clock. Used as the officers were to gruesome experiences, not one remained unmoved at what was found in the attic and under the red checked tablecloth on the floor below. The whole aspect of the farm, with its grey desolation, was terrible enough, but those 2 crumbling objects were beyond all bounds. No one could look long at them, and even the medical examiner admitted there was very little to examine. Specimens could be analysed, of course, so he busied himself obtaining them. And here it develops that a very puzzling aftermath occurred at the college laboratory, where 2 phials of the dust were finally taken. Under the spectroscope, both samples gave off an unknown spectrum, in which many of the baffling bands were precisely like those which the strange meteor had yielded in the previous year. The property of emitting this spectrum vanished in a month. The dust thereafter consisted mainly of alkaline phosphates and carbonates. Ammi would not have told the men about the well if he had thought they meant to do anything then and there. It was getting towards sunset, and he was anxious to be away, but he could not help glancing nervously at the stony curb by the great sweep, and when a detective questioned him, he admitted that Nahum had feared something down there, so much that he had never even thought of searching it for Merwin or Zenas. After that, nothing would do but that they empty and explore the well immediately. So Ammi had to wait, trembling, while pail after pail of rank water was hauled up and splashed on the soaking ground outside. The men sniffed in disgust at the fluid, and towards the last held their noses against the fetor they were uncovering. It was not so long a job as they had feared it would be, since the water was phenomenally low. There was no need to speak too exactly of what they found. Merwin and Zenas were both there, in part, though the vestiges were mainly skeletal. There were also small deer and a large dog in about the same state, and a number of bones of smaller animals. The ooze and slime at the bottom seemed inexplicably porous and bubbling, and a man who descended on handholds with a long pole found that he could sink the wooden shaft into any depth in the mud of the floor without meeting any solid obstruction. Twilight had now fallen, and the lanterns were brought from the house. Then, when it was seen that nothing further could be gained from the well, everyone went indoors and conferred in the ancient sitting room, while the intermittent light of a spectral half-moon played wanly on the grey desolation outside. The men were frankly nonplussed by the entire case. They could find no convincing common element to link the strange vegetable conditions, the unknown disease of livestock and humans, and the unaccountable deaths of Merwin and Zenas in the tainted well. They had heard the common country talk, it is true, but could not believe that anything contrary to natural law had occurred. No doubt the meteor had poisoned the soil, but the illness of the persons and animals who had eaten nothing grown in that soil was another matter. Was it the well water? Very possibly. It might be a good idea to analyse it. But what peculiar madness could have made both boys jump into the well? Their deeds were so similar, and the fragments showed that they had both suffered from the grey, brittle death. Why was everything so grey and brittle? It was the coroner, seated near a window overlooking the yard, who first noticed the glow about the well. Night had fully set in, and the abhorrent grounds seemed faintly luminous with more than fitful moonbeams. But this new glow was something definite and distinct, and appeared to shoot up from the black pit like a softened ray from a searchlight, giving dull reflections in the little ground pools where the water had been emptied. It had a very queer colour, and as all the men clustered round the window, Ammi gave a violent start. For this strange beam of ghastly miasma was to him of no unfamiliar hue. He had seen that colour before, and feared to think what it might mean. He had seen it in the nasty brittle globule in that area light 2 summers ago, and had seen it in the crazy vegetation of the springtime, and had thought he had seen it for an instant that very morning against the small barred window of that terrible attic room, when nameless things had happened. It had flashed there a second, and a clammy and hateful current of vapour had brushed past him. And then poor Nahum had been taken by something of that colour. He had said so at the last, said it was the globule and the plants. After that had come the runaway in the yard and the splash in the well. And now that well was belching forth to the night a pale, insidious beam of the same demonic tint. It does credit to the alertness of Ammi's mind that he puzzled even at that tense moment over a point which was essentially scientific. He could not but wonder at his gleaning of the same impression from a vapour glimpsed in the daytime against a window opening on the morning sky, and from a nocturnal exhalation seen as a phosphorescent mist against a black and blasted landscape. It wasn't right, it was against nature, and he thought of those terrible last words of his stricken friend. It come from some place where things ain't as they is here. One of them professors said so. All three horses outside, tied to a pair of shriveled saplings by the road, were now neighing and pawing frantically. The wagon driver started for the door to do something, but Ammi laid a shaky hand on his shoulder. "Don't go out there," he whispered. "There's more to this not we know. Nahum said something. Lived in the well that sucks your life out. He said it must be something growed from a round ball like one we all seen the Meteor stone that fell a year ago June. Sucks and burns, he said, and just a cloud of colour like light out there now that ye can hardly see, and ye can't tell what it is. Nahum thought it feeds on everything living and gets stronger all the time. He said he seen it in his last week. It must be something from away off in the sky, like the men from the college last year says the meteor stone was. The way it's made and the way it works ain't like no way of God's world. It's something from beyond." So the men paused indecisively as the light from the well grew stronger and the hitched horses pawed and whinnied in increasing frenzy. It was truly an awful moment, with terror in that ancient and accursed house itself. 4 monstrous sets of fragments, 2 from the house and 2 from the well, in the woodshed behind, and that shaft of unknown and unholy iridescence from the slimy depths in front. Ammi had restrained the driver on impulse, forgetting how uninjured he himself was after that clammy brushing of that coloured vapour in the attic room. But perhaps it is just as well that he acted as he did. No one will ever know what was abroad that night, and though the blasphemy from beyond had not so far hurt any human of unweakened mind, there was no telling what it might not have done in that last moment, and with its seemingly increased strength and the special signs of purpose it was soon to display beneath the half-clouded, moonlit sky. All at once, one of the detectives at the window gave a short, sharp gasp. The others looked at him and then quickly followed his own gaze upward to the point at which its idle straying had been suddenly arrested. There was no need for words. What had been disputed in country gossip was disputable no longer, and it is because of the thing which every man in that party agreed in whispering later on that the strange days are never talked about in Arkham. It is necessary to premise that there was no wind at that hour of the evening. One did arise not long afterwards, but there was absolutely none then. Even the dry tips of the lingering hedge mustard, grey and blighted, and the fringe on the top of the roof of the standing Democrat wagon were unstirred, and yet amid that tense, godless calm, the high bare boughs of all the trees in the yard were moving. They were twitching morbidly and spasmodically, clawing in convulsive and epileptic madness at the moonlit clouds, scratching impotently in the noxious air as if jerked by some alien and bodiless line of linkage, with subterranean horrors writhing and struggling below the black roots. So ends part 4. In part 5, the entity shows itself, and in a dramatic way, terrifying the investigators watching. If you enjoyed the tale, it helps us if you let others know, so please click the like button and share with others that may be interested. Subscribing will let you travel with us on further adventures of the dark and terrible, with the bell notifying you as we set off. If you want to join our Eldritch Order on Discord, come visit us on Patreon or YouTube, coming soon. Then you can join in the discussions and even help guide the choice of stories. There is an ever-growing list of insane benefits. See the description for details of the Patreon and for a link to Canje Studios to find out about modern board games where you can create your own dark and terrible stories. Until next time, farewell. But be cautious, as you may think you desire to know the unknown, but your discoveries can prove you very, very wrong.